Hey everyone, I know it's been a while since I uploaded a video, but the tragedy happened in our family. In January, my grandmother, my mother's mother, passed away. We've been in mourning ever since. She was our matriarch, someone we looked up to and loved dearly. And it's been difficult trying to process all of this and live with knowing she's gone. It still feels like she's here sometimes. But I wanted to get back to this, and she supported me doing this. So I'm hoping to come back to this with new vigor and passion. Today's video, we'll be talking about Jurassic World Dominion. I was so disappointed with this film. To me, this is the worst film of the franchise. I know people talk about how bad Jurassic Park 3 and how bad Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom was, but Dominion blows them both out of the water. There's so many problems within this film itself and the continuity of the trilogy and the franchise. This film is almost like an insult to the franchise that I have loved since I was little. For those who know me, I love dinosaurs and I love this franchise. It's one of my favorite movie series of all time. I was so shocked and horrified by what they did with this movie. I was looking forward to this ever since it was announced. We had the dinosaurs out in the world. They could have done so much with this movie. This movie is basically spitting in the face of this franchise and its fans. In this review, I'm going to discuss multiple problems that this film has. And I apologize for doing this film a little later than I should have. And I apologize if I repeat any criticisms that you've heard other YouTubers say. But several of these points I'm going to make are worth discussing because of how blatantly bad they are. So let's get lost into the story. You know how the summary of this movie was about dinosaurs and humans living side by side? That's not what we got. There were two main plot lines in this movie, and the first one I'm going to discuss should have had no part in this film. It shouldn't have even been a possibility for this movie, and that's the Locust plotline. I don't know who came up with it, but I don't know what they were thinking. This is a dinosaur movie. It had no place in this franchise. It had no place in this movie. Dawson had his company scientists develop these insects to wipe out crops, except on farms funded by his company. For what? Why was this even in there? I know the locusts were from the Cretaceous, but I saw no point to it. It wasn't anywhere related to dinosaurs. This is what brings in the original characters. It's not involving anything that these characters have experience with. And let me be clear, it was good seeing these characters again, but not in this way. Yes, we had them with other prehistoric animals, but that wasn't the driving force behind this. Why did they think locusts were a good idea for the franchise? The only good addition to insects in the franchise was the mosquito. Of course, the blood would have very likely have been diluted and degraded over time, but still, that was at least partially believable. It fit the story at the time. Yes, the original movie had its flaws and everything, including with the dinosaurs themselves, but it was still much better than what we have now. Dodson's locusts were one of the main antagonistic forces in this movie. I mean, it's humans using locusts to destroy land and vegetation in an ill-conceived idea. There's not much to say about this plotline, because if at the board meeting for bringing out ideas for this movie, and someone suggested this, someone could have said, "Are you out of your mind?" And that would have stopped this. I just don't know why they thought this would be a good idea for a dinosaur movie, for a dinosaur franchise. I just wish when they were in pre-production for this movie that this would have been discarded immediately. The other main plot line for this film was involving the kidnapping of Macy Lockwood and Blue's offspring, Beta. This plotline could have possibly been a part of the film that we were promised. But no, it was involving locusts again. We had Dr. Wu realizing the mistake he made with the locusts. I wish that the creators of this film would have realized the same way Wu did about these locusts. With Dr. Wu, we had a little bit of character development with him, but it wasn't development that really fit. We saw him being an unapologetic scientist in Jurassic World and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom behind both the Indominus and the Indoraptor. And this film could have had him slowly realizing the mistakes he made in the past. And this kidnapping plot is the driving force behind the new trilogy's characters' actions in this film. It eventually connects with the Locust plotline and the original characters, but it's still hollow in its meaning. This included the addition to the cast with a new character who I thought she was an okay character. I mean, I don't think they developed her character very well. It's kind of difficult, like with the Locust plotline, to describe all the flaws with this because this plotline was so poorly executed, and it had the hollow connection to the Locust plotline that I thought didn't really bring the two parallel plot lines together very well. And it was a little more focused on Maisie than Beta and her origin, which I'll get into later. This plotline could have been written better within the movie we got, but just had too many things going against it that just made it fall apart. And sadly, these two plot lines were the driving forces behind this movie. It was just so unexpected and not in a good way. This movie was supposed to be about humans and dinosaurs trying to find some way of coexisting on the planet together. As the summary said, one of the driving forces behind it was discovering which collective group would have been the dominant species on the planet. Now, I'm not saying I'm the best writer, but there were some things that this movie could have involved that could have really followed the summary. One, it could involve the matter of invasive species, of animals being placed into an environment that they have no original origin in, and the destructive effects that it can have on the ecosystem and the environment. One example of this is pythons in the Everglades. These snakes completely took over the ecosystem, killing countless animal species in large numbers. And let me be clear, it's animals being animals. They're not evil or bad for what they do, they're just following their nature. For the opposite end of the spectrum was when wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone. Wolves were once native to this area and throughout the 48 contiguous United States. Wolves are apex predators. They keep balance within ecosystems and nature. For once they were reintroduced to the park, things changed for the better. For one shocking and amazing example was the effect that wolves had on the rivers, which I will leave a link to in the video in the description below. And continuing on with the wolf point, as many of you know, wolves have not been viewed with much reverence by many people in the past and present. Many have hated and feared wolves and have sought the destruction of the entire species. This was something I thought could have been introduced in the film. Animals like the Velociraptor, the Allosaurus, and the T-Rex would have been hated and feared like wolves. People would have tried to hunt them and kill them, which likely would not have ended well for them. And with people focusing on predators like we often do, we would forget to realize the destruction herbivores can have on ecosystems and the environment. Like in a forest with a large deer population with no wolves to hunt them, the deer will overpopulate and consume all the vegetation that they can, giving other animals far less sustenance and possible homes that they can live in. And given this with these herbivores and having their natural predators possibly out of the situation or driven away, it would have left the animals already native to that area between a rock and a hard place. This is because of human interference and bias involving certain animals. A sad irony about our species in regards to our relationship with other living beings, especially with those we see as a threat or challenge to us. And drawing on this is the possibility of trophy hunting. Sadly, so many of us like to hunt and kill animals for sport, not for food, sustenance, or survival, just for fun and petty glory. That's why you see people hunting animals like lions, tigers, and other majestic and amazing creatures that live on the planet with us. And like I said earlier, in part because of trophy hunting is also the idea of humans being superior to other species, and also our bias and fear and hatred of other animals. Ideas like this could have driven this movie. And you know how I mentioned the kidnapping plot could have been added into the movie we were expecting and hoping for? Well, that's because, specifically with Beta, could have fallen into line with how humans sometimes kill animals, especially with predators that they view as nuisances or as threats. There is the story of where a man was hunting a clever coyote who was evading and outsmarting the local people trying to kill him. They hired a hunter to kill the coyote for them. The hunter had discovered that the coyote had met a pure white female, so he captured and killed the female and used its blood and scent to trap and kill the coyote he had been hunting. This could have been used in the film, with Beta being used as bait to hunt and kill Blue. Because like with coyotes, Velociraptors are cunning, as was stated in Fallen Kingdom, where Blue was able to avoid the hunters trying to capture her. And they used Owen, someone that Blue knew, to find Blue and able to capture her. And I know what I have suggested is cruel. It is. Using Beta as bait to kill Blue, like how the dead female coyote was used to kill the coyote the people had been after. As even the hunter later said he should not have done. And this could have been an example of people trying to wipe out a species of animal they consider an extreme threat to their safety and their survival. As Alan Grant said in Jurassic Park 3, he believed if dinosaurs didn't go extinct, Velociraptors would have become the dominant species on the planet. In this movie, there is a lot of incontinuity involving both characters and storylines of this franchise. One was Maisie's character. In Fallen Kingdom, we see her as a result of her grandfather/father cloning her from his daughter after losing her. But in this movie, Maisie was a result of a self-induced pregnancy by her mother to prevent her from having the illness that she was dying of. But she didn't die because of her illness. That was not the context of Fallen Kingdom. I thought this change was very bizarre. It broke off from Maisie's origin story for why she was in the world. I don't think what happened with her character in this film, or rather what she discovered about herself, flowed well from what happened in Fallen Kingdom. Fallen Kingdom had its problems, but it was more of a setup, I think, to this film. But even then, Fallen Kingdom was still better than this movie is. Because at least what Fallen Kingdom's summary was about was what that movie was about. This, as I said, the summary of this film was not what we got in this movie. Maisie's character history was just completely thrown out. And even if that's what they were going for, they could have hinted at that within Fallen Kingdom, but they didn't. It was just a complete change altogether. It was hard to grasp, and it was hard to see how that connected with the movie we got prior to this. And another inconsistency with this film was involving the Giganotosaurus. In the prologue, we saw how the T-Rex looked different. She had feathers. But in the prologue and in the movie itself, the Giganotosaurus look completely the same, except for perhaps size. The Giga in the prologue towered over the T-Rex, but in the movie they were around the same size, which I thought it's closer to what the animals actually were in comparative size. They could have made the Giganotosaurus look different in the prologue and made it look how it did in this film, but I don't know if they thought we wouldn't notice, but that's just one thing I thought that they either didn't realize or thought we wouldn't notice. But once they saw it, they should have completely changed it. One thing that was used in the film, but was not explored, was the chips apparently used to control the dinosaurs. The scientists at Biosyn did not explain the process of doing this, if that there were any bugs or updates to these chips that would make them more effective, how the dinosaurs reacted to this invasion of their bodies. None of this was presented in the film. This also ties into when Dodson was confronted by the Dilophosaurus, and he had no way of stopping them. And seemingly, the point of these chips were to be able to control these animals like puppets, but didn't have a device on him that could stop the animals from attacking. This was a plot hole within the film. This also could have been something that Biosyn could have used on a grander scale of people having chips to control their own dinosaurs. It was briefly mentioned, but it was completely left out. Of course, this was dropped in favor of Locust and the kidnapping plots, instead of actually focusing on the animals the movie is supposed to be about. But as you know, the film was not what we were expecting. So I guess we shouldn't be surprised that this important detail was completely overlooked. And something we also saw involving Owen, but also other characters, with him hold out his hands in front of the Velociraptors in order to keep them calm and steady as best as he could. He was using this with other predatory animals. But this was something he'd only done with the raptors, because unless there was footage of other men having used this technique to try and calm the animals, or Owen himself using this on other animals as well, and found it to be a useful technique, it seemed almost out of place. But in part, perhaps this is just a reflex of his to try and hold off or try to keep calm a powerful predator. But for Owen, this is more understandable. But we also see Maisie and Dr. Grant using this later in the film with Beta. Because unless Beta had experienced this herself with Owen or Maisie in the past, I'm not sure how well this would have worked. I'm not saying it's impossible, but to train a wild animal, it would take a lot of dedication and earning the animal's trust and respect in order to do this. But we see this out of the blue several times with Owen and the other characters. But plot holes like these are also mistakes that were made in the movie that could have been recognized and fixed. But these were problems that made the movie more faulty. Another glaring problem with this movie is its characters and dialogue. And I'm not blaming the actors for this. I think they did what they could with what they got. I mean, these are the same actors who did great performances in the films we got prior to this, but the writing is what just made this fall apart. One example was what I was looking forward to, or I thought should have been An important moment with this film would be the interaction or interactions between Owen Grady and Dr. Alan Grant, two men that have different interactions with velociraptors. The former having trained and raised these animals, the latter having studied them and then being hunted and nearly killed by them. When these two men met, I expected Dr. Grant to be asking countless questions, like specifically, how did Owen manage to train these animals? Or him telling Owen he was insane for trying to train these animals, that these animals were too dangerous to control, as he would have put it. But Owen, as he stated in Jurassic World, it was not about control, it was about mutual respect, about having trust and understanding with these animals, about seeing them as another living being. That was something I thought could have been a defining part of this film. These two characters being on perhaps opposite sides of whether these animals deserve to live or not. But that's not what we got. There are certain callbacks to various parts of the franchise, especially the first film, involving the canister that Dodson had given Nedry to collect the dinosaur DNA to bring to him and to his company to create their own animals. And then we had Dodson's death that followed how Nedry died in the first film, being killed by Dilophosaurus. But unlike Nedry's death, Dodson's death was a good example of the poor writing in this film. He just asked them a question. And I'm not saying someone can't be calm or fearless in the face of death. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that this was an example of the writers not knowing what they were doing. It was an ill-conceived idea of the main villain's death in the movie. We saw it, he was a mysterious figure in the first film. We could have seen a lot with him in this film. We could have seen him built to be behind the scenes of certain things that we saw in the franchise. Dodson's character was poorly written, his scenes were not well executed. He was like an awkward character that did not seem to have much relevance in this film. You can have awkward villains, but he was not a very believable character. His death, I know it was supposed to mirror his acquaintance's death in the first movie, but it was nowhere near as well written or as well performed as Nedry's death in the first movie. Another character that had problems with its writing was Maisie's character. She had been kept in this cabin isolated from people, as Owen and Claire are trying to protect her from the people out there. And I'm not talking about her anger for being locked up. That is more than understandable. And it seems Maisie just almost cast aside the reasons why she was in danger. I thought, based on what she had seen in Fallen Kingdom, would have made her understand what was happening. And let me be clear, I'm not saying it was necessarily fair for her to be locked up. I'm saying I thought she would understand why she was being protected like she was. The dialogue and actions of certain characters were really awkward. It didn't feel like natural. It didn't feel like the right energy was being placed into the lines they were saying. Some of the actions they were taking were ill-conceived. Like example, with Malcolm meeting Ellie Sattler and Dr. Alan Grant at that center where Dodson's company was having reserved for the dinosaurs. He was meeting with her, full view of the cameras, trying to convey to her secrets. He was trying to be slick, he was trying to be cunning, but being in full view of the cameras, acting in a suspicious way, speaks to how poorly written these character actions were. Ian Malcolm is supposed to be a charismatic and smart man. He's supposed to know what he's doing, but it seems like he's incompetent in the actions he's taking. And some of the lines he's stating aren't like the same natural, smooth, and to the point statements that he's known for throughout the franchise. Owen and Claire's characters are understandably focused on Maisie, but I thought based off the summary to the film, they would have been heavily involved in the public and legal actions involving the dinosaurs. Because in the Fallen Kingdom, we got a leap in character development for Claire. She went from underestimating and looking down on the dinosaurs in Jurassic World to fighting for their freedom and their rights in Fallen Kingdom, which I thought was at least an acceptable form of character growth for her. As at the end of Fallen Kingdom, her and Owen resigned the animals to their fates, but when Maisie frees the animals to live their lives, I thought they would have followed her example in this movie, but that's not what happens. They almost completely ignore the animals, but any potential for them for following Maisie's example and for Maisie herself to be a spokesman for these animals is nowhere in this. This is just completely casting aside character arcs, their connection to these animals. It's ignoring what these movies are about, not just the dinosaurs, but about the human relationships with these animals. To follow up what I was talking about, there are two dinosaur characters in this film that I thought should have had larger roles than they did. And to start off with is Blue. Blue has been one of the most intelligent, if not the most intelligent velociraptor seen in the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World franchise. She was a leading dinosaur character in Jurassic World and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, but she had no role in this movie. Why? She had her offspring, which another subplot could have been Velociraptors making a comeback into the world with this new sign of offspring. Given how Dr. Wu explained he used monitor lizard DNA to complete Blue's full genetic code, she was able to asexually reproduce Beta, which could have led to these animals reproducing and creating a new population, which could have had Blue as a matriarch to this new line of Velociraptors. She could have been leading a pack of her own eventually, helping them survive in this new world, but she was only in the movie for a few scenes. It was involving Beta, yes, including one scene with her hunting, but it was not explored. Blue was cast aside in this film, and Beta herself didn't seem to have all that much of a role either, in my opinion. It was mostly in favor of Maisie. I'm not hating on the human characters. What I'm saying is the dinosaurs did not have the place and the roles within this film that they should have. And the other dinosaur character, which, as I imagine you all already know, is Rexy. She has been in more movies than any of the other dinosaur characters. She is the most iconic animal in the franchise. She's a T-Rex after all, the queen of the dinosaurs. Arguably one of the most powerful predators to ever live. And she was only in there for a few scenes as well. Her role was majorly reduced, like in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. And I'm not saying for her to overshadow the other dinosaurs. Let her have a respectable role in this film. She is the icon of this franchise. Dodson's company was able to somehow capture her, showing her being captured. You're talking about one of the most ferocious and powerful animals to ever exist on this planet being captured by humans. How? How were they able to capture her? That should have been shown. And her interactions with the Giganotosaurus, which I will also get into later, was majorly reduced as well. Like with the prologue, specifically involves her and the Giganotosaurus in an ancient prehistoric rivalry and battle. And that's glossed over. When I heard the prologue wasn't a part of the film, I was shocked, and not in a good way. I thought the scene was okay. I thought it really helps set the tone for the film. You're introducing another formidable predator into the franchise that challenges Rexy for the role of top predator. In nature, you have certain predators in rivalries and conflicts, which I will get into later, but Rexy, we could have seen her taking a role as the alpha predator in the world. I mean, she could have been anywhere in the world and become the top predator. It could have shown her interactions with other animals, with other predators. At the end of Fallen Kingdom, we saw a very brief standoff between her and a lion. That, or something similar to that, could have been explored into the film. Her coming onto the scene as a new top predator and having her interactions with other predatory animals, and how this addition or intrusion into an ecosystem could have gone. But we didn't see that with her. We didn't see the potential or prowess of this animal that we've seen in the past in this film at all. With both Blue and Rexy, their characters were wasted in this film. For this point, it's about the final fight in the film, involving Rexy and the Giganotosaurus. Like involving the fight scene between Rexy and Blue against the Indominus, this is poorly written, but even more so in this movie. I know with films like this, people want to see epic fights, epic action scenes, which we got involving the hunt and chasing scene involving the Velociraptors. Like Jurassic Park 3 and Jurassic World, the main fights between the animals were poorly written and poorly executed. And let me be clear, my favorite dinosaur is T-Rex, and in the past, I was not happy to see the T-Rex be beaten, but obviously I was foolish for that. The confrontation between the T-Rex and the Giga in the prologue was, I think, a little more understandable. While the size comparison, like I said earlier, in the prologue between the animals was not realistic, in the description below I will leave a link to an analysis of the fight in the prologue of a video by Goji Center. I will try to explain the final fight. I will also leave a link to another video by Goji Center involving an analysis of how a fight between the T-Rex and a Giganotosaurus could have gone. While I will give my own description of how the fight did go and how it could have gone, as earlier in the film there was a small confrontation involving these animals, involving food. That scene was understandable. The Giganotosaurus' skull was longer than the T-Rex's. It could have likely gotten its teeth onto the Rex first, and it was also involving a deer, a food source that would not have been worth a fight for either of these animals. So Rexy went on her way knowing this wasn't a food worth the fight. That was more representative of how predators interact in the wild over kills and prey. What we got in the final fight was ill-conceived. While briefly the T-Rex, it was able to clamp her teeth onto the Giga's snout, which should have crushed it because of how powerful the T-Rex's teeth were. It almost seemed like a mosquito bite to the Giga rather than something that should have crushed the end of its skull. And then the Giga proceeds to quickly overpower the T-Rex, and similar to how the Indominus did in their fight. And the Indominus was supposed to be more lethal than any of the animals and made up its genetic code, which included both the T-Rex and the Giganotosaurus. But the Giga was able to overpower the T-Rex quickly. But based off what happened, especially where the T-Rex was able to get her teeth onto the Giga, should not have been like that. But what could have happened instead was the Giga would try to avoid the mouth of the T-Rex, which it would have known, or at least sensed, that Rex's mouth was more powerful than its. So it would have tried to take the side of the Rex. Like in the prologue, gone from the side and clamped its jaws onto Rexy and used its claws to slash or at least hold the Rex's side, while it used its mouth to damage Rexy's neck. Which, is conceivable. If the Giga was able to avoid Rexy's mouth, it would have had an advantage. But instead, it just went full force straight ahead, which it could have gone very well into Rexy's jaws. But that's not even the worst bit. The worst bit was involving the Therizinosaurus into the fight. Yes, I know there was fires going on into the preserve, but even then, I thought it would have run past or run away from this fight, sensing it was another danger. So it should not have been involved in a fight between two large and formidable predators. It basically appeared out of the blue, and it was just the T-Rex grabbing the Giga and pushing it towards the Therizinosaurus with its claws going through the Giga's body, and then the two roaring in triumph. What could have happened instead was the Giga and the T-Rex circling and snapping at each other, the Giga trying to get to the Rex's neck from the side. But, as we saw with the prologue, with the T-Rex being an intelligent predator, because apparently this was the same T-Rex and the same Giga from the prologue, it would have learned from that previous fight, or may have used the same tactics the Giga used by going to the side and using more powerful jaws to clamp around the Giga's neck and end the fight quickly. The T-Rex and the Therizinosaurus defeating the Giga was ill-conceived and ill-executed team-up. I think it was supposed to mirror how Rexy and Blue fought against the Indominus Rex. That fight was more understandable. Both Rexy and Blue were in danger involving the Indominus Rex. But the T-Rex and Therizinosaurus against the Giga did not make any sense. It was just a random encounter. This dinosaur fight was worse than any fight in the franchise. This movie had the potential to be one of the biggest movies of the year. It had the potential to be a great conclusion to the Jurassic World trilogy. And we had the scene with the prehistoric animals living alongside the modern animals. While I will say it was touching, it did not save this film. It was really one of the only main scenes that reflected what this movie was supposed to be. But I don't know what the creators of this film were thinking. This film was one of the worst disappointments for any form of fiction that I've ever had. The Jurassic Park and Jurassic World franchise is one of my favorite movie series of all time. One of the favorite film franchises for many people, and so many, including me, were disappointed and infuriated by what we saw in this film. We waited a long time to see an epic conclusion to this franchise, and we didn't get it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I will try to get back to my videos as much as I can. And once again, thank you for watching.